Awesome. Thanks everybody for joining, being patient as we get started. Today, we're going to be talking about building a strong cybersecurity foundation in partnership between Blumira and Axis Interactive. So thanks, Brian, for joining us. Brian Gawne, sorry. Did I say that right, by the way?
You did, and I'll answer to anything. So yeah, you're completely fine.
VP of Security and Compliance at Axis Interactive, and Axis Interactive being a great partner of ours, working across the IT stack as a managed service provider and services provider. So thanks for jumping on, Brian. Want to give a quick overview of yourself and your experiences before we hop into the conversation?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Patrick. This is fun stuff to me. So it's a lot more fun than trying to run practice at some days and times. So, but really, my name is Brian Gawne. I've been a Metro Detroiter my entire career, I've been here my whole life, pretty much. 25 plus years in information technology and security, probably 27 years if I really think back in all of this. I've done everything from the workstation side of this to building servers, pulling cable, infrastructure. I goofily raised my hand in a meeting way back in '94 when somebody said, "Hey, who wants to install this thing called a firewall?" And next thing I knew, I had a box and a software box and a Solaris machine sitting on my desk, like, go ahead, do this. I'm like, what the heck is it? So here I am 25 some odd years later doing the same thing. But spent a lot of my time, working with clients in various size organizations throughout the United States, building security programs, assessing where they're at currently, trying to just help them, move the needle from a security perspective, both from a program perspective, but hardware, software, whatever it happens to be, just so that maybe they can sleep at night, if that's possible in this day and age. But, look forward to the discussion, Patrick.
That's awesome. I actually came out of working in a similar space. I can relate a lot. So a long time ago, I worked for a managed service provider, and have the experiences of pulling cable and making exchange config changes as a sales engineer. So no, likewise experiences, and I'm excited to talk about some of the approaches you've been able to apply towards security and compliance. So going over our agenda today, we'll talk through some of these different topics: getting executive support, talking about overall cybersecurity strategy, selecting a cybersecurity framework, some of the important things to do that tie back to cybersecurity framework, such as getting at asset inventory, documentation tools, measurement, and then we'll talk a bit about detection and response. So I'm looking forward to this conversation as we hop through, Brian, and thanks a lot to join on this. So yeah, I think this is a big topic as we shift, getting some of the executive support from organizations. I see this all too often. I transitioned from managed service provider to working in product companies, and so often you're in security and people are making security decisions not to do anything, and the number one thing I hear is they don't have budget or executive support. And so curious to hear your take on how IT and security teams should be approaching this.
Yeah, it's a common theme. If you really think about it, IT and security used to be overhead to a company. They didn't generate revenue. They didn't provide, revenue-based value. It's just a tool that we need within the organization. A lot of what, I see clients being challenged with is exactly that. Well, my budget, I need more resources. I can't get the executives to sign off on the policies or the awareness training, so we're not having that get done. And I kind of turn it around to them and say, well, you've built a program, or you're building a program. Do you understand the executive's goals? And I think a lot of this, and a lot of the discussion I think we'll have here, today, is just thoughts I want, anyway, the attendees to take and say, well, am I asking these questions? Am I considering this side of the discussion? Because if you go to the executive team, whether that's the CISO or the CEO or whomever it is in your organization, and start saying, well, what's important to the organization? What are the goals? What are you trying to achieve? What are our clients asking for? All of these things. you can start figuring out, well, here's how security can help you achieve help the owner or the board or the executives achieve that goal. A lot of things like, oh, we have clients who are asking, what we're doing with their data when we receive it, or how our security program is. Well, if they're not getting that information, it's not getting passed down to the IT security team, how do you know how to prepare the executives to answer those questions? It's kind of that, help the executives achieve their goals, and then by doing that, you can achieve yours and get their attention and build along with this. The biggest thing I look at this as is, if we're getting their buy-in of, what risks they think the organizations face, or what's important to them that we may not be aware of, or threats that they might see, whether it's the competitive side or things they're seeing when they're talking to their counterparts across an industry. All that information can help us build a position to enable them to either achieve their goals, or say, if we could do these things, we could get rid of this concern that you have. I hate to say it, it's a sales pitch and trying to get their buy-in. That's the biggest thing. It's not going to over control the environment. It's really, how do we align security to support the business instead of just controlling every action a user could take.
I think it's really interesting, the things that you're saying, because I look at myself being responsible a lot of times in sales, as well as working in product and helping across the board. But truly, I think a lot of people don't realize sometimes that security can be a competitive differentiation and help an organization win revenue. And a good example of that is, like, if any customer is asking, do you have this compliance, or how do you make sure you're secure? Being able to answer that quickly and confidently, and then also potentially even putting that out there publicly so that people know, can build confidence in the consumer, whether it's a B2B or a consumer to business purchase. And so it can really have heavy influence that people sometimes overlook, or don't even realize inherently. And they treat it as like, oh, we just need to fill out this form and check all the boxes, right?
Well, and that's we got to get this past checking off the boxes. There are times when you have to go do that to meet some requirement or something along those lines, but there are other times that checking the box, that's great, but we all have heard the thing, just because you check the box doesn't mean you're secure, or just because you're compliant, it doesn't mean you're secure. There's a lot more to it. But again, it all starts with, getting that budget and that support from the executive standpoint to move the program along. But I mean, if we can go to the next slide, it's fine, because all of this information you're going to learn from the executives is what ties us in to how do you build the strategy from the perspective of how do we grow a practice or a business or a practice or whatever it happens to be. If you've started companies, and Patrick, I know you've been involved in a lot of startups, there's always that strategy of how we're going to move forward, what we're going to do, what we're going to sell, what's the plan. And it's that high level 10,000 foot view of all of this.
They should never give me slides, because I'm also.
I was going to say, is it Monday?
Hey, I think on this topic, I think it's all too often. I think this is a great question for the team here. Yeah, we have 35 people on these calls, right? Mm-hmm. How many people on this call actually probably know, what their mission or their goals from a company perspective are, and like how they can actually help grow that and achieve that mission, whether it's growing revenue or gaining more clients and that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think all too often IT and security take a back seat of like, I'm just trying to provide a reliable service that works, that meets the needs of the business. But I think it is making sure that everyone is on the same page. And if you don't know that, asking the right questions to find out, because that's really the fundamental to starting getting executive alignment. And the other thing I would say there is, like, any executive, if you come to them and say, what's the goal of this company? I think they're going to have much more respect for you. And it demonstrates that you have an interest in the interests of the business, more or less, right? I don't think any of them would, hopefully not. If they act like you're stupid, then you probably should go find another company to work for.
or another executive to talk to. I mean, it is that. I mean, even as, I'm in the consulting side. I've spent a few times, a few years on the other side of the table, helping organizations, building a security program. But, being a consultant, that's the first thing we're always trying to figure out is what is important to them? What are you trying to achieve? How do we help you get there? And at the same time, align security to the business so that, we're supporting you to achieve your goals, whether it's e-commerce or a cyber program to make client demands so that you can say you're doing the right things. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going on out there that security now can be a driver or differentiator, as you mentioned earlier. The government has programs that used to be NIST 800-171. It's turned into CMMC. You have to have those frameworks or those controls in place to do business with the government at a defense contract level. Without that, you don't get to play. And they're starting to enforce that now. So that's, talk about risk to business. Without having this, that could be one of them.
Yeah, and if you take an approach of getting ahead of it, it can actually give you competitive differentiators where like other businesses might actually not have strong controls, right? Or
Correct.
meet those needs. So,
but that's, I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, and I think shifting down, now talking about strategy a little bit is how do you approach security as it relates to strategy overall, and where do you start?
I hate to, it's just what we were just talking about. Starting is understanding the business. Any place I've gone into within the last 10 years or so, it's been, what are we trying to do? I want to learn the organization, learn the goals to go build this security program. I've played, one of the things we do is we offer CISO as a service. So I go out to companies and I'm their chief information security officer for whatever long they want to keep me. One of them was over about 3 years we played this. Another one I just got done with a year. And learning their organization to how to move the security program forward is the biggest thing. And then taking that information and building a strategy of, what are the goals for security? What are the goals? How they align with the business? What are the things we need to start looking at and prioritize our activities to? Because without that, what usually ends up happening is everybody goes about 10,000 different directions. They're all trying to go do what they think is right. Having the strategy that kind of sets the motion, the team in motion of, here are the things, maybe it's in order without getting too tactical. I don't want to say, oh, we need to install antivirus or a firewall. We need to come up with a security program, and that security program is going to have a lot of different components. And part of those components to me could be, having a framework, understanding, where we sit today from a security standpoint. How do we assess, what risks impact the company? What risks, what's the awareness level? And the goal of all this from my standpoint is I want to build a roadmap to say, here are the things we should be doing. Here's how they kind of fall in line. I don't want to say a project plan, but it's really, that's how it looks a little bit. And then start, enabling the teams that are with me on this and go, all right, here are the 2 or 3 things you can do. Here are the 2 or 3 things the other person can do, and get buy-in from not only the executive side of the company to say, this is what security strategy is to support the business, but also from that internal perspective of what is our team, the team's buying into this vision. If they all buy into it, then everybody starts, going down the same path with the same mission, same goals and objectives. And it's something we can achieve pretty easily. I mean, at least starting the program. Security is the never-ending battle. I thought I'd be out of a job by now, but 25 years later, we're still talking about this stuff. And there's a couple of people on this call that I've seen there that have given some presentations about, hey, why have we failed as an industry if we're still doing the same thing we were doing so many years ago? But
yeah, I first off, I launched a poll on frameworks because we're going to move to that in a sec. What frameworks or regulations do you face or have requirements around for everyone in the audience? But I think that I'm kind of laughing because the concept of market saturation and whatnot of security. When I joined Duo in 2012, Duo Security 2-factor authentication, I remember after like 2 years, it's like, oh, did we sell to everybody that we could possibly? Because like, it just seems like this market, like everyone's probably adopted 2-factor, right? We're now like 10 years later or like 8 years later, And I can tell you with confidence daily, I get on calls with people that don't have basic security controls like multi-factor. And so, yeah, your question of like, well, security is the one industry I think where like you will always have a job and there will always be opportunity, because there's a lot of different things you can do, could do, and then there's the ever evolving landscape of threats. So it is a real reality that like it changes. You got to be somewhat dynamic and figure out what things do. So our poll, it's on its way. The number one framework people are marking off as NIST, and then closely followed by almost everything else: PCI, HIPAA, other, and then lastly ISO, GDPR, and CCPA. And so, yeah, I think the key, and that was only about like, that's less than half the attendees. So
Okay.
we're getting some more in, but yeah, curious. Some people might not even know what a cybersecurity framework is. And a framework doesn't also mean the same thing as regulation. So it'd be great to hear from you what these frameworks are and how to use and leverage them.
I mean, yeah, and I'll say it this way, and it's all kidding aside. We used to, as a consulting industry, talk about best practice. We're going to assess you against best practice. We're going to help you build your cyber program on best practice. I never had a client ask the question, well, who's best practice and where do you get them from? Because you really didn't have an answer for it. It was just whatever we thought was the best thing to do at the time. What's ended up evolving in the last few years or longer actually is, you have NIST, who was building standards and things like that. We're using government. Those have bled out in the public sector. ISO has built out cyber frameworks that can be complied with, or you can become compliant with or certified against, or you can just use to build your tool set. Others like CIS have come out there, and it's really just I hate to say it, it's just a structured set of best practices for how things you should consider as an organization for your security program. It doesn't mean you have to do it. It's more of, for authentication, do you have separate accounts for administrator and the user who's the administrator? So he's doing his normal thing. He acts as B gone, and then when he has to do administrator, it's A-B gone or something like that for administrative type privileges. Do you do that or not? That's all these are, is a collection of or guidance of what tasks or controls or things you think about from a security program. There's umpteen version flavors of NIST out there. NIST 853 is the most robust one. NIST CSF, I kind of consider this, it's the executive view to security. You take 853 or other frameworks and you roll the information up into NIST CSF, and you can gauge maturity that way. There's other ones out there for building risk programs and just any number of things. CIS is another one that's come out. They have their top 20 security controls. These are all great frameworks. In a framework, like I said, just nothing but I consider best practice, documented best practices now that everybody accepts, that you can use to build that program. The difference that I'll look at this of, what's a cyber framework versus a regulation. Regulation, you have to do it more or less, or you don't get to play in that business space. Think of PCI or HIPAA or any of the financial ones that are out there, because there's more than we have time to talk about in that regard. The frameworks, you don't have to become certified in or comply with. Just use what you want out of those frameworks to build your program. There are a lot of clients, they'll say, we can't do this control because it's going to cost us way too much money. Fine. What can we do as a compensating control? What to instead of doing that control? Or do you just accept, the risk of not doing that? Is the threat that small that we don't have to worry about it, or we're just going to accept it and go on? At the end of the day, the business owns the risk to what they do and don't do in security. An auditor can't tell you this, an assessor, I can't tell you that if I'm coming to doing an assessment, you tell me, no, we've accepted that risk. I can't argue that decision with you. That's something that hopefully the executives and the security team have made on their own. But if you think of the regulations you mentioned, if you think of PCI or HIPAA or these other ones that are out there, GDPR, CCPA, they're the same things. They're all, you should do these controls. Now you can actually be audited against them and show compliance. But the nice thing about all the frameworks is none of them are by and large unique. They don't reinvent the wheel. So I can take controls from NIST 853 and map them to what a control in ISO, or map them to a control in COBIT or CIS top 20. In the same token, I can take those same controls and compare them to PCI or HIPAA, or if it's Sarbanes or SOX or whatever FFIEC, any of the frameworks that are regulatory frameworks that are out there, and you should be able to map a lot of those controls between them. The goal that, and I know he's on the call and I'll get him for it later, but the goal that's been beaten in my head over the years is then, pick a framework. Really just pick one, start with something, but we can map the regulatory controls into that framework to make sure you're covering everything, so that when you're going through an assessment or an audit every year, you're only doing that once. You can take those results and then respond to all of the regulatory requirements and kind of, I would say, check the box, but you can become more efficient for how you're doing all of this. It's a big key. I mean, there's a lot of mapping out there. I think NIST has a lot of it as well, and others do, where they show you, for this framework, here's the controls, here's where it matches in either regulation or other frameworks. The best thing, I mean, to look at this is just, this is the easiest way for an organization that really hasn't focused on cyber to start looking at things that they should start considering. And they can do it in baby steps. They don't need to, eat the whole elephant in one bite. They can take CIS top 20 and look at implementation groups 1 and 2, because they kind of got them divided by in 3 groups, or NIST 853 has it in high, medium, and low. It depends on what level of control you need, but start someplace.
Yep. No, I think that's the key there, is starting someplace, getting some level of the controls in place. And I think that's the thing, is it's gap analysis, right? It's where can you make the largest impact? What's the most important priority wise? To demonstrate that. And a lot of times, even on the auditor side, that's what they want to see is progress, not necessarily perfection as well. So it's important. Once again, I need to learn how to click properly and go behind between slides. Wait, what was I doing? Sorry, I had the poll up here. So I'm really failing today.
Not enough coffee.
I only had 1 cup, so that's probably it.
That's probably it, yeah.
Asset inventory, right? So as we start looking at key areas, like, hey, where do I start as it relates to frameworks, and then within my own environment? I think asset inventory, you have mentioned, is a pretty big key, and more or less just knowing even what you have and what to protect, right?
That's really where the key is. I mean, this slide and the next one are, well, they're all important, and we could have hour-long discussions on any one of these slides. It's really hard to kind of consolidate all this down and say, okay, we've got this much time, let's try to cover like 6 or 8 things. But just as that primer, if you don't know what's in your environment, how do you know how to protect it? I mean, it's as simple as that. And asset inventory and other ones we'll get into are usually, they're in, I know it's in NIST, I know it's in CIS 20, I know it's in COBIT. All of them have this thing. Do you have an inventory of your assets? And an asset is not just, a keyboard or a mouse or a computer or a laptop. It's much more than that. We can start there. And, my mentality is please start anywhere, but also start looking at, the data, the applications. In past lives, one thing we were preaching to clients about was, build this in some way, some form. You can start with, version 1 of an asset inventory, and it's just a list of the servers that you have in the environment, maybe the IP address, something you may be using, from a depreciation schedule for the financial side of the house. And sometimes I tell people, hey, go start there. If they had that list, you've already started. Now you just need to fill in some more boxes. But the idea behind all this is, if we know what we need to protect and we know where the data sits on these assets, we can build a more cohesive security program where we're not putting, let's just say, I'm not going to go put PCI controls on every system in the environment. If all the PCI data sits in one place, I'll isolate it and I'll do something different in that regard. But the other side of this is as you get more and more detailed with this asset inventory, so if you're tracking the OS version, the patch level, the applications that reside on that system and their versioning, as threats come out, to, or threats or vulnerabilities come out to the world, you could quickly do an analysis and say, oh, well, we don't have that operating system, or it's already patched to the level we need to, or we have compensating controls, or yeah, we need to go do something, and here are the systems we need to do it on, from the standpoint that trying to make your life a little easier to address new threats or new vulnerabilities come out, to focus your attention on where you need to focus, and not think of, okay, we've got 8,000 devices in our environment. What are these devices, and where do we have to focus first? Do I just apply a patch to everything? I mean, patching is an important part of this as well, but it's just knowing what is out there is equally as important.
I got a question for you. Do you, and this is kind of a joking question, but do you know what the world's most common asset inventory database is?
I'm gonna say you can tell me, because I could guess about 1,000 different things. I'll be wrong on all of them.
I think you're gonna be right. I think you just said it.
Excel.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like Google Doc or Excel. Like some people say, like, hey, where do I get started? What tool to use? And it's like not suggesting that's the greatest solution for asset inventory, but like, yeah, I mean, so often you see IT people, it's like, hey, go look at all your IP addresses and document once what they are. Is a good example of just a place to start, and that could be internal and that could be external. And there's a lot more to it than just that, but yeah, the reality is time and time again, working with thousands of customers, what I can tell you is a lot of time the reality piece is like, it isn't necessarily a purpose-built tool that gets you to a starting place here.
There was one. I'll have to tell the story just because you'll love it, because it ties right into this. We were doing an executive presentation for a client in New York, and we were talking about asset inventory and all of this, and the guy goes, "Oh, we can't do that. It's too late." And this is the large client we were talking to. I'm like, "What do you mean it's too late?" "Well, we've been in business this many years. Where would I start?" And I'm like, "Start with what you have." I mean, it's just, you got to start someplace. I mean, hire an intern for the summer and say, your job is to fill this spreadsheet out.
Yeah, and then I think there are many different ways to then start doing discovery, so you can find what else is out there that you don't know about. Is a good example.
Vulnerability scanning. Use the vulnerability scanner to identify by IP address.
Yep.
I will tell you, I used to talk with purchasing groups. What have you bought? What's the purchase inventory for the hardware you've bought lately? Where is that at now? Go try to reconcile some of the stuff that they've acquired that IT didn't know about. You could use, you could use SIEM tools to find some of this. You could use network management or monitoring tools to find devices that are on the network. The same with software. There's a lot of stuff out there that's, in my mind, it's already available. It's, Microsoft has their deployment engine for software. Well, it can do an inventory. Data, there's a lot of different ways, whether it's, simply running searches, which I don't think is the best solution, but you could get DLP solutions. You could have other, types of solutions that are either freeware or go buy to inventory data across your network to figure out where that, I want to say high risk, but that valuable information is. And
what you're probably going to do is export it to an Excel spreadsheet and then merge it all together.
or you're going to have multiple tabs. Yeah. There are lots of ways with some of the, the ITSM tools or GRC tools that are out there that build configuration management databases, where you take all of that Excel data and put it into a database, which is, if I'm honest, it's really just an Excel table, and you can do anything you want with it. But it's a lot of the ways that, when you look at like RSA Archer or ServiceNow or these other platforms that are out there from the GRC worlds, they use that asset inventory to assign controls or assign risk or whatever they're doing with them. So it's all an important piece to this.
Yep. No, I agree 100%. And I know I'm joking so much about the Excel spreadsheets, but yeah, even some of the enterprise tools, that's essentially what they're doing, is processing and formatting data in a database or a spreadsheet, so you can gain that visibility. So cool. So documentation side.
The stuff we all hate to do. Yeah, the last thing an IT person wants to do is document what they did. Call it job security.
I got 10 tickets I got to work.
Exactly. You know, how did you implement that router? I threw it in, plugged it in, put a config. You're good. See ya. No, but documentation, whether it's policy procedures, any of the stuff that's on the screen, the importance is that we have, you know, they're a key part to security. Knowing what your architecture looks like, knowing what your policies state, because it's you know, we could go do an assessment and you're going to talk to somebody and they're going to tell you everything down to the nth degree of what they do and how they do it. Is it in writing? Because if that person leaves or an auditor comes through, it's going to be one of these, okay, you told me this, doesn't match what you have written down. And a lot of the things I look at this is policies are not hard. There are thousands of examples out on the internet, and probably 99% of them are free that you can borrow, steal, take whatever you need to fit your organization. The keys after that factor, review them on an annual basis. Once they're accepted, train your end users on them so they know what their role is in cybersecurity. And then when you're reviewing them, you know, sign off that you've, you know, there's a history, a document history for that policy. If you can get to the point of saying this policy addresses this control and this cyber framework, great. You made the auditor's job easy. They don't have to go, this policy is, oh, that one. They can just, it's there already. It's just part of the life cycle in my mind. We need to do these things. I mean, when we're doing work for clients, at our last steps are documenting what we've done, giving them the reports, giving them the findings or the recommendations to go improve their programs. That's all part of this. You know, and in some of these, not only should you have it documented, but you need to practice it. So if you think of IR or BCDR, you need to look through those policies or playbooks or plans, however you want to phrase it, and make sure the individuals in your organization understand their roles in this. And you're not pulling out for the first time when a Microsoft Zero Day comes out and your Exchange server is now not working the way it's supposed to. I hate to pick on that one, but it's still front of my mind. These are things that need to be looked at frequently, but they're also that key part to any good program.
It's no, I agree with you. I think the Exchange one is extremely relevant, right? It's I mean, I think the good thing there is like that type of stuff surfaces at such a loud level that it kind of bypasses everything else. It's hard nowadays with so many vulnerabilities popping up every single day to figure out, hey, how am I impacted?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's in a lot of cases, having documentation will allow you to answer that question quicker, faster, and be able to respond to real risks and threats when they rise and pop up. All right, so going from there, tools, the only thing you're going to need is an Excel spreadsheet.
So as long as you have Office, you're good.
Or G Suite.
Yeah, or G Suite or Lotus 1-2-3 if you really haven't gotten out of that era. So,
oh man.
But I mean, I'll make it simple. You know, past life, I had a client we were helping out from a CISO perspective. They had let go of their former CISO because he spent $1 million in one calendar year on every technology you could think of under the sun. And when the board and the CEO asked him, how has this improved our security, or what has all of this investment done to make us better? He kind of did, I don't know. Couldn't really relate it to them. Also, they had an IT team of 5 people. So it's one of these, you bought all these tools, you can't monitor, you can't manage them. You're not looking at what's going on. You're not an expert in the tool that you have in your environment. It leads to a lot of potential to be a problem in my mind. It's you know, you need to have resources. They need to be trained in the technologies you're using to use them efficiently. They need to understand what information that tool is giving them back. You know, I'm of this mindset now that we need to start, you know, and I'll caveat to this. Now you're turning the slides off on me. But,
I meant to move over. I'll get back to him.
No, you're fine. But the idea is, you know, start looking at software suites in some cases instead of buying whatever's in the Gartner magical quadrants. The idea of having, you know, if a software suite can provide you 80-90% of what all the best of breeds would have, and it's one platform, it's one pane of glass, it's one vendor you're buying software from, or one supplier. One, it may be economic advantage. 2, it lets your team focus on one or a few platforms instead of a laundry list of them. But all with that said, there's still gaps to fill. So there's still places for niche players to be implemented into this. And there are still solutions that, in my mind, that even though if a suite of tools offers it, if you think of Microsoft Office 365 and everything it offers to a client, there are some tools that you still may not want to use because there's issues. It's not giving you the data you want to see. You can't really measure it the way you want it. It just doesn't work. So you need to look at other solutions. So it's a combination of this. It's just like we used to go tool happy. And I probably was guilty of it back in the day. Tools were great. The more we had, the more things we could do with them. But you have to still have the ability to, implement, monitor, update, manage, understand all what it's telling you, but also understand if we're going to go pick a new tool, what's the total cost of that tool to the organization? Does it require new hardware? Do we require additional training? Do I require additional resources to get it implemented and manage it? And then the bigger question is, what does it do for your strategy? If you built this strategy we were talking about 4 or 5 slides ago, is it helping the cyber strategy for the organization? Things like, does it decrease the risk to the organization? Is it improving the efficiency of the security team so we can do more and absorb more information and take actions quicker? Or is it enhancing the visibility to what's going on in our environment so that we can act quicker? All of those are, I guess, are questions I start asking when we start talking about new tools and things like that. And I want something that just, in the end, I can implement very easily. It doesn't take a big learning curve to become proficient in it. And we can work with, and I can take information from it to report to executives. Pick your tool, whether it's AV, antivirus, XDR, EDR, any tool that's out there. All that stuff's got to play into it at some point.
Yep. I think on the tool side, for me, a lot of times I try and simplify and deduct it down. And this isn't a perfect dynamic, but it's like, if I just really think quickly from a visibility perspective, a security perspective, it's like the low hanging fruits are having MFA, having security monitoring, detection, response, probably like in the instance of SIM, having an MDR on the endpoint itself, and then having vulnerability scanning. Because it's like, you have those four pieces, there's a good chance you're going to take care of a lot of the controls that we're talking about. There's other tools as well that probably would be categorized as security, like a firewall. But that's one where it's like, yeah, people don't just not implement a firewall in their network. Haven't seen that one in a while, at least.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I think like the maturity of these controls, certainly you see them continuing to become more consistent in environments. Even to the point MFA, Microsoft on new accounts at least now requires it by default.
Well, that's driving the whole password change standard that's coming out there, where 8-character passwords are now, we don't need it. And I think I read something last night, the night before, where Microsoft's kind of starting to change their best practice around an 8-character password change, or character password, and going to changing every 60 to 90 days to, let's go to 15 characters, but let's use MFA, or let's use some other way of authenticating as well, so that we're doing this the smart way. And then the industry is going to continue to evolve from a tools perspective, and we'll have to adapt to what best fits the environment. And and then what AI does to everything we do will be very interesting. I'm not 100% drinking the Kool-Aid yet, but it's definitely showing some promise.
Yep. Oh, for sure. Kind of next aspect is, how do you then start to measure what success looks like from a security program perspective?
The cool thing from my perspective is you can define what success looks like, at least in my mind, right? If I'm building this program and I want to measure it, any movement in the positive way is success. So if I'm measuring my maturity levels, for NIST CSF, and year over year or biannually, we're measuring this and we're showing improvements in one or more areas, that's great. If the awareness program or other campaigns you run within your environment are showing improvement. So everybody likes to go do phishing tests now with all their users, and hopefully they're not just attacking like the accounting group on Monday and somebody else on Tuesday. They're spreading it. They're making it a very disparate group. If the click rate goes down, and other things that you're experiencing in the environment from the awareness side goes, those numbers are positive, then the awareness program's working. A lot of this is what's the executive, what's my boss want to go see from a cyber perspective? How do I make him tell the story to his boss or the board or whomever it happens to be, or shareholders, to say we're doing the right things, here's how we're scoring, we have all these great tools, here's all the number of attacks we've detected and stopped or investigated that haven't turned it. Any number of these metrics can be of value. Depends on who you're talking to in the organization. If you talk to my managed service team, we're showing clients, here's how many malware attacks or things that were stopped at the perimeter or stopped because of the solutions that are in place, or things that we had to escalate to you for attention. All of those metrics mean something because the client sees the value. It was the same way with the executives. If they're showing that, if I could track, we had this many contracts with clients who required security as part of the bid, and we won it, and security was, I would show that information to leadership to say, hey, your spend helped us generate revenue. Now let's, I need a little bit more. How much more revenue do you think we can generate? Again, it really comes on the metrics you think are important.
Yep. And I think you're right, showing progress towards that from a metric standpoint over time, because it's like ultimately that's kind of the goal. And I think controls as it relates to framework are very similar, showing progress, that you continue to make progress. And then the other thing I think is like, IT environments change rapidly, right? And I think cloud adoption is a great example of that. But it's continuing to maintain and ensure that the new things that come up, or the new things that enter the environment, end up having the same controls.
Correct.
And the same security measures. So
I mean, cloud's just somebody else's computer that we have to control and do the security for. It's just, now it's again, it's a tool. Yeah. Do we have the expertise to administer it and integrate it into our environment and do the right things?
Well, I think this is an interesting topic, because all too often what I see is people, I have this conversation a lot, which is they make the comment, oh yeah, we're moving to Office 365. And oh, by the way, Exchange was like the #1 boon for Microsoft and why people are moving there, which I think is funny. But the reality is what I hear people say is like, oh, I'm not worried about the security controls until once we get everything operational and working in O365 and Azure. Mm-hmm. And so there's this aspect of like, we'll do it later. And unfortunately, what I see often is like, when people do that, they end up getting like, your biggest risk is actually in the migration and transition to a new service from a security perspective. Because people by default are like, oh, let's not worry about the security of it. And it opens just that window of opportunity for an attacker to come in and take advantage of it. And so I just wanted to highlight, like, for everyone on the call, I think it's important to note there, just to be mindful that you shouldn't wait with new services coming online to apply security controls, because so often that will be the reason why you end up having an incident from a security perspective, or a breach. And so
it goes into software development lifecycle, right? If you think of it, security needs to be a part from the very beginning. It doesn't matter. It's this regardless if you're moving to the cloud, if you're taking on Office 365 in the cloud or Azure, or whatever it happens to be, security needs to be involved from day one, and you need to plan accordingly. The biggest thing I've seen with clients in Office 365 is they think Microsoft's taking care of everything. They don't look at that responsibility or RACI chart to say, here's where Microsoft's responsibilities end, and here's where yours still exist. It's really an educational side of this still too. People just think, well, we're going to move everything to the cloud, we're good. It doesn't, we don't have to worry about it anymore. So it's again,
the cloud.
It's the cloud. It's hey, somebody else's Linux service.
There has been some progress, like Microsoft saying we're going to enable 2-factor by default. But yeah, I mean, like, that was just in the last month or two, right? Yep. And so you cannot assume these things are secure by default. And you also can't just say like, oh, there's not attacks or risk similar and or different in these new environments. So, all right, we're gonna talk a little bit about Blumira and how we help in some of these different areas. But while I'm doing that, though, we're gonna have a competition.
We didn't talk about this earlier.
We did, but it's a poll. No, and the competition is, after the call today, do you want to talk further with Brian and or Patrick? And so option 1 is Brian. Option 2 is.
Oh, that's no fair.
I cut out for a second. Option 3 is Brian and Patrick, and then option 4 is no, thank you. So it's a competition between
anybody
me,
but those
us,
two guys. Yeah.
No one. So I'll throw that up there. Anybody that's interested in engaging with us afterwards. And while we do that, hey, I got a vote. I got 2 votes, so I'm winning right now.
I'm going to audit those results.
Oh man, no one wants to talk to Brian. Man, I'm sorry. All right, we got a Brian. It's tied now. This is funny. Oh, Brian's winning now. Oh, someone must have changed their vote. It's all good.
It's gonna cost me money later. I know it.
I'll leave that open and then I'll publish it towards the end. But and then we'll have our teams reach out and we'll get on a call with you. Anybody that asked, and then no thank yous. Maybe we'll reach out to you anyway. Hey, we have one that wants to talk to both of us. That should be fun.
All right, let's pick up.
Yeah, so on the Blumira side, right, what we focus on is the security challenges as it relates to detection and response. And what I can say for most small and medium-sized businesses, and one of the reasons I came here a year and a half ago, is the reality is most organizations don't have great detection and response or visibility into real threats across their environment. And the main reasons why is they have limited teams. I mean, I've seen, small to medium-sized businesses with 1 to, I should say 0 to 3 dedicated security resources. A lot of times it falls in the hands of IT. And so they just don't have the expertise or time to know what's important, how to respond, what to do. In addition to that, like the tool sets like SIM, for example, have been pretty complicated. And so having the resources, skills, and as a lot of our people we talk to would equate it to a Splunk PhD, it's just too cumbersome. And then the last aspect is like you have purpose-built tools that could be your firewall and other security controls, but it's impossible to figure out which things to actually respond to because of the amount of noise that comes out of them, or what things you should even investigate. So what we do is essentially purposefully help deploy detection and response capabilities. We deploy in a couple of hours in really any size environment with customers. You don't have to be a IT team that's significant or large. Really, a single person is typically involved in deployment unless it's access to tools. And then we surface detections that are real threats, high fidelity, and help you respond or help automate response in the cases where we can. And so I think, Brian, from your experience, I think probably one of the biggest things here is just enabling the visibility, actionable outcomes without necessarily having the expertise or the time, is probably the highlight of really what we've brought to value from a customer standpoint.
I think there's a lot of value in everything you've said. It's a challenge right now. Finding IT security talent is difficult. Let's just be bluntly honest there. And to have tools that are, especially like Blumira, because I have experience with 2 others and Blumira now, because since I've joined Access, I've gotten to work with the technology quite a bit. But to have something that can stand up quickly and see benefits from in a short term rather than the long term. It used to be that you'd buy some of these other platforms, whether it was even like in the GRC space, you'd buy ServiceNow, and that was the cheap part. Getting it to work within your environment is where the money really was spent. And the same I've seen with as you mentioned, the Splunk PhD, when those tools have been deployed, it takes a long time to get all that to work the way you want it to. I've not experienced the same thing here. It's just,
And in the highlight, I'm going to tell a story here because I think this is kind of funny. It ties back to the compliance sign and the visibility. We had an organization we engaged with, and they came to us, and compliance was important for one of their vendors, and they misinterpreted. They said, "Hey, we don't want you to use a VPN for remote access, right?" And so what they did is they just put RDP on the internet. And that being said, they didn't know that RDP is pretty much remote exploitable, right? And the easiest way to get in to deploy ransomware. And so like we detect things like RDP on the internet access, SMB exposure, across the gamut, both on premise and cloud, of a lot of the common techniques and tactics. I think we're up to somewhere around 700 different detections that are high fidelity. And we really focus on that high fidelity because we know our customers don't have the time to sort through and figure out what things actually matter. And the way you go about that a lot of times is focusing on persistence, opposed to a single time point in place. And so if we look at the down the attack life cycle, on the discovery side, getting visibility into scanning internally, externally, is something coming from malicious IPs, gaining a foothold with password spraying, account compromise, remote RDP connections. And it kind of builds out beyond that. I think there's 6 different areas from an attack life cycle that we help organizations with. And how we do that is essentially we automate on the front end with purpose-built integration. So we tie into your Windows, your Azure, your Active Directory, really soon another cloud infrastructure service that begins with A. And we automate essentially the ingestion, parsing, detection rules, and then prioritize and alert you. And if it can be automated, help take action. If it can't, provide a playbook on what to do. And I guess while I'm talking, I can end this poll and I'll share the results. Brian, you beat me. Just being mindful of time here. And what this ends up looking like is a purpose-built detection that provides you visibility into, in this case, hey, new Office 365 inbox rule creation. Why is this important? Well, that's a great way to exfiltrate data, for example, by forwarding email. And so like this is something you would want to go take a look at and respond and remediate if necessary. So those types of simple steps, so that someone in help desk or IT can quickly respond. And I'm gonna try and hop out of the screen for a second, show the product itself for one to 2 more minutes. So quick product demo. But what that ends up looking like is, if you can see here, being able to go in, get alert, and then go see an example detection. And there's a lot of different ones here. A good one might be any connect anomalous access where someone's doing password spraying. And we can see the users and the IP addresses, but simply just being able to come in here and block the source IP address of the attack without having to figure out like, oh, I got to go to a firewall to do that. I got to go put the IP addresses in. That's essentially purpose-built, all done for you. And then you can take a step further and actually automate this stuff. So you could configure it. Pause my screen for a sec, sorry. But you can configure it to essentially be automated from a response perspective, which I was going to show. But that's really the joy as it relates to the platform with Blumira, is it's simple, easy. You can automate a lot of this workflow and it doesn't take much time. And the last thing I would just leave it with there is, with every customer, for the most part, what we encourage people to do is just try the product itself. And I was going to share my other screen. Worst presenter ever. Never give me these controls again. But yeah, essentially what that allows you to do is to gain that visibility into your environment and see what things are at risk. And more than often than not, pretty quickly, we're able to surface some real tangible things that a customer can then go take action on, that then increases that security bar and then helps them meet the standards as it relates to these frameworks with CAS and NIST and other requirements out there. So that's my high level demo. If anybody does want a trial, you can go to blumira.com/trial to try the product out. And that's a 14-day trial period where we can help you get up and running, and we hop on calls with customers and help with the deployment if they need assistance. But that's more or less one to leave that with everyone on the Blumira side before we finish and wrap up regarding our discussion today on areas to focus. So Brian, anything you want to summarize as far as like the high level recommendations? Again, I wrote some of them down here, but if you have them
it's easy. I mean, mine are easy. Pick a framework, any framework, just and work and talk to the executives. Those two things will get you a lot of information to move forward and act on a security standpoint. The rest of it will just come as you start reviewing them. The frameworks, I mean, again, the frameworks will guide you through the questions, and you can figure out like, yeah, we're going to do it, or no, we're not going to. But that's the start. Policies and procedures, those are important too. But again, having the framework, they'll kind of guide you through all of this. But knowing the business, I think, is the biggest one.
Yep. Gap analysis and understand the business, having those relationships, which is great. So, well, cool. You're in Ann Arbor. Anything going on with U of M these days?
No.
Not
that I'm aware of. I've got two kids who play travel soccer. My life has revolved around carting them around. So that's all I can do anymore.
Oh, fun. Last night I went skateboarding and across town. So that was a good time. That's mostly what I'm up to. But always rooting for Michigan in sports and whatnot, which is pretty cool. So thanks everybody for joining today. We'll reach out to you if you had filled out to talk to myself or Brian and I, and we won't reach out to you if you asked us not to engage with you. So thanks.
But we
so much
outnumbered those requests.
Yeah. We beat those, so we're good. Good job. Thanks so much for the time, and it's always great to connect with you. And also, I think last I'll leave it with you, Axis Interactive. I'm gonna tell you to give you a quick pitch on what you guys do, because I know you've been a really strong partner for myself and a lot of others that I've worked with, and providing services and consulting.
The easy way to say it is Axis is an IT integration and security company. So everything from VM, Microsoft, Dell, cabling, infrastructure, all that kind of fun stuff through the security. Security is intermixed within all the practices, but we have the practice I'm responsible for. We're doing everything we talked about: build programs, gap assessments, product implementations, monitoring Blumira and other platforms for our clients that don't have the resources to do it, and basically just trying to help secure organizations so they don't make the front page.
Sweet. It's been awesome partnering with you guys. I recommend organizations engage you on the consulting side. And thank you so much for coming on here and talking about some of the important frameworks and approaches to take as it relates to your security program. So
thanks for the opportunity.